For a while, when engaging with the Cherry Magic fandom, the release of the sub-Cherry Magic movie was on everybody's mind. Hell, we waited 7 months for an international release, and after all that time, only a few questions remain. Was it worth it? Will it exceed my expectations? And what is the reason we as viewers sometimes have to set our expectations so low in the first place? Well, today, I'm here to answer those queries once and for all. The original Cherry Magic drama is a lighthearted fantasy. Our routine-driven protagonist, Kyoshi Adachi, gains a magical memory ability on his 30th birthday as a result of his virginity. He then stumbles across the shocking realization that his seemingly perfect coworker is in love with him. However, the opening scene of the second installment begs the question, what happens after this spell is broken? What happens when Adachi can no longer rely on his magic and must learn to trust? I'm not sure what I was expecting this movie to look like, but wow, did I love it. The Cherry Magic movie gave me everything the people refreshing the AO3 tag have been waiting for. If you know, you know. Jokes aside, the pacing in this film blew me away. It truly felt like an all-encompassing second season. Although the sequel lacks some of the humor and vibrancy of its predecessor, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, at least not for me. Although the humor and overall absurdity of Cherry Magic was what drew me in the first place, it's not the sole reason that I stayed. Over time, I and others grew to favor some of the more down-to-earth moments between Adachi and Kurosawa, and I think the series grew with us. I appreciated seeing the characters spend time together, and I think their relationship developed enchantingly. As much as I love the original series, the over-the-top situations and circumstances were not made to feel believable, hence the words over the top. In contrast, this movie tones down the quirky scenarios to make room for authentic relationship building and natural domesticity. I loved seeing all sorts of different chapters in Kurodachi's lives together, even outside of their office setting. Things I had wondered and thought about, but we didn't get to see much of in the original. I also interpret this movie as a love letter to its queer fans, touching on topics like coming out and long-distance relationships, even gay marriage, things that can be unfortunately few and far between, let alone handled correctly. It doesn't surprise me that a company like GMMTV would want to pick up a lighthearted show like this. Cherry Magic has a cringe-worthy and ridiculous premise that I almost said no to at first glance, but I took a chance on the Japanese live action, and it checked all of my boxes. I want to start this segment by saying I have not and do not plan on watching the Thai Cherry Magic remake, so when it comes up in this discussion, I am only able to use the points and topics I've heard other netizens talking about. Everything I know has come from research, not physically viewing the show. I also understand that I lose all credibility to talk about it, but I'm hoping that this will start a discussion for the people who have seen it, where either you guys can fill me in, or you guys can discuss what you did and didn't like about it. From the moment this adaptation was announced, I have had a prejudice against it. I'm very worrisome when it comes to GMMTV. A user by the name of Tyne on my drama list puts it best. The fixed pairing culture of Thai BL shows makes no sense to me, and considering the acting quality of the show was what got me into Cherry Magic in the first place, I was worried it wouldn't live up with the casting made so cash-grabbingly. I felt the exact same way. This user goes on to detail how, in their opinion, the adaptation suffered by trying to follow the J-drama while following basic Thai BL formula. Overall, I've heard bad things about its pacing, characterization of Adachi and Kurosawa, whatever the hell they did with Fujisaki and Pai. Again, overall, mostly tainted by people who adore the original Cherry Magic. That fandom is strong. This user also let me in on a detail that I would have missed otherwise. One of the major plot points of the Cherry Magic movie is the transfer to Nagasaki. This user states that in episode 9, the transfer is changed from 1 year in the manga to 1 month. 1 month! That relationship should have crashed and burned, especially with what I've been reading about how weird Kurosawa is in this. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. On the other hand, other users under the same Cherry Magic 2023 page on my drama list have said that this adaptation is one of the best BL series they've ever watched, claiming it's miles better from the Cherry Magic Japan. Again, I guess we're just taking everybody's word for it because that's what you're doing with me right now, but as long as my critical thinking cap stays on, I'm going to have to disagree with that. I think any company has its pros and cons, and I do genuinely believe that GMMTV has produced a lot of really good and at times groundbreaking shows. I believe it's best compared as a Disney for BL. I've heard a lot of people say that focusing on the BL side of GMMTV is not a fair comparison because a lot of non-BL GMMTV shows are great, and to some degree I can side with that, but I also noticed something within that statement. Why is that? Why is it that a famous and well-regarded company that has clearly been shown to produce well-made and entertaining stuff can only give what appears to be a bare minimum effort towards their queer shows? What does that say about how they regard queer people and the types of people who might watch said shows? Personally, I don't think it's right for GMMTV to have this sort of monopoly over the industry, when we can all see their bare minimum effort towards the LGBTQ+ community, the community that they constantly capitalize off of. I'm not sure if it's because BL can at times be an undersaturated genre as a whole, while GMMTV likes to pass it out like candy, but that doesn't mean that they're handing out full-size candy bars. A lot of this stuff is great value, and let me tell you, they're making some Lindor chocolate money. This isn't to say that I think we should take down GMMTV and they're ruining BL, or anything like that. I don't believe that in the slightest. One of my absolute favorite shows right now is Bad Buddy, one that I've been rewatching something for years and I can't ever seem to shut up about. And I'm a strong believer that Bad Buddy needed every single piece that they had. If it wasn't made under GMMTV, we would not have Ohm and Nanan playing the main characters. Without them, I think the characters of Pat and Prawn could have read more as archetypes than people. And I think without GMMTV's writers, the characters might lack enough depth to give Ohm and Nanan anything to work with. What I'm trying to say is, there isn't anything inherently wrong with liking GMMTV shows, let alone their BLs. There are some good queer shows that stand out to me, and a lot of people. For example, He's Coming to Me, A Tale of a Thousand Stars, Three Will Be Free, etc. And there are a lot of advantages to having such a big company produce queer media and popularizing it as much as they do. I would just like to see some more thoughtful production in the company literally leading the industry. You have to admit that we don't hold them to the same standards as we do other shows or companies. Even within GMMTV, they're not held to the same standard. Knowing this, and knowing how highly regarded Cherry Magic is by me and others, I was very nervous about this reboot. Other than me being evil and not giving the show a chance, there was one major thing that just genuinely worried me about this adaptation: the beloved character, Fujisaki. I love the change originally made to her character when they translated the manga into a Japanese live action, changing her from your typical Fujoshi archetype into a kind, regularly supportive friend. And if I'm not mistaken, our girl Fujisaki is Aro Ace. So tell me why the fuck you would give her a male love interest. Have you even watched the original adaptation? Or are we just going in blind? I'm aware that the director X Nitapong has clarified that the drama style of the Thai version will be substantially different from the Japanese one, something I partially expected, but still, deliberately taking away very important representation not only from queer people in general, but even more so from people on the Aro A spectrum. I don't know, just reads pretty gross to me. I haven't heard much buzz about this since the actual release of the show, so I'm just hoping that they stuck to just being good friends, especially because her storyline in the original live action only really made sense because she is Aro Ace. Now, why does the Cherry Magic movie stand out to me so much? Well, I think that has mostly to do with the sequels and second installments I've seen in the past. Whereas the Cherry Magic movie sets out and succeeds in improving upon the former, things like I Promised You the Moon only really work to undermine the significance of some of its original pillars, such as characterization. While it does stay true to things like cinematography and atmosphere, I Promised You the Moon skips out on developing and staying true to previously built major character details, so much so that it barely gets by without scrapping the characters entirely. As I've previously addressed in both my Bad Buddy and 23.5 video, staying true to a character's motives, values, internal and external behaviors are so important when crafting conflicts, and in turn, their resolutions. When any of those things are wildly out of tune, it not only frustrates the viewer, who has invested time to get to know said characters, but also it causes the credibility of the characters to crumble. As a result, I have no way of knowing when what used to be an although humanly flawed character, but still helpful, will start flipping tables for shits and giggles. From a writing perspective, it makes no sense. If you strip a character completely to make a plot point work, then you might as well just use a new character entirely. I compare this type of writing issue to when I see certain fandoms get a hold of alternate universes. Like, yes, Emma, Ray, and Norman could hypothetically run a coffee shop together if that's what you really want, but by making it entirely canon divergent, you must leave out all the lived experiences that makes those characters themselves. Therefore, what you're really telling me is, you like the archetype that character started as, more than the character themselves. To me, this problem is primarily what made I Promised You the Moon so agonizing. Like, in I Told Sunset About You, Tay does shitty stuff, but his motives are for the most part intact. I can have empathy without excusing him, because he's written like a real, multifaceted person going through emotional turmoil. And I Promised You the Moon, he starts acting downright devious. He repeats his mistakes, he throws tantrums, and he's a big baby throughout all of it. If I remember correctly, the actions in I Told Sunset About You were supposed to bring his flaws to the surface, forcing him to reconcile with them and improve for the people he loves in the sake of moving on. So like, did he just forget what was likely one of the most formative experiences of his life? Or, well, lucky for him, I Promised You the Moon's time skips allow him to do just that, and he lucks out with a happy ending. Yay! Also, this all exists without me even mentioning the whiplash that is Jai. Fellow YouTuber and analyst Pastilin has a way better and more in-depth video detailing I Promised You the Moon that I highly recommend for a more thorough examination. But for right now, I use I Promised You the Moon as a prime example of how easily the world of a show can be tainted with the misuse of story continuation. I Promised You the Moon doesn't work as a standalone or a second installment. They really should have left I Told Sunset About You alone, but of course, hindsight is 2020. And it does take trial and error to perfect something as fragile as its original story when introducing more conflict. Situations like this are not uncommon, and I believe that's partially why I was so enamored by the Cherry Magic movie, and why the news of a GMMTV adaptation worried me. It is commonly said that the sequel is never as good as the original. Why is that? Well, for starters, sequels are not often manufactured to be equal in value to the original, only to build off of pre-existing success. But this fails when considering what else you have to build off of. Standards. A blogger I found, Adam Wynn, puts it this way: the real problem for most sequels is that they are at their core unnecessary. Unless you're working with a complete story that's being set up into separate installments, each sequel needs to be its own story. Now, do not misinterpret this as me saying that you need to separate it from its original completely, but it needs to have all the elements included in any other story: context, context aside, the plot should work as a standalone. As a result of this, when a second installment of a series is announced, I'm weary. Even if it is working off of good source material, the plot could still diverge into a sour path. I feel like most attempts at second installments tend to be built solely on conflict alone, once the source material has been milked dry. But doing so will likely stretch your characters thin, at times causing them to be borderline unlikable. By creating superficial conflicts or circumstances, you're putting your characters and their relationships through unnecessary stress just to make the ending more satisfying. The Cherry Magic movie flipped that idea completely on its head by focusing more on smaller scale issues that would naturally arise given their environment. It did genuinely feel like they came out stronger because of the situation that they were put in. For example, when Adachi is transferred to Nagasaki, it sort of feels like the end of the world, but as we see them both processing to the transition individually, making their relationship work is shown to be an equal commitment from both of them. The misunderstanding that occurs between them feels very real, and neither side is right or wrong to feel a certain way, even if they each have their own different point of view. Adachi and Kurosawa experience hardships that test their bond, but handle them as we would hope most adults would. It brings a sense of calm to what should be an overwhelming world for Adachi to navigate. When characters like Te or Oeo experience hardships that test their bond, Te becomes irrational, blindsided, and at times manipulative, making it nearly impossible to mature and naturally solve problems, also making it nearly impossible for the audience to root for them. Hey, editing side here, I just wanted to come on and clarify that I don't think you have to solely portray good characters or characters with good relationships. I think that if you're going to portray somebody who's generally unlikable, you need to treat them as such and not romanticize it by giving them a happy ending. They need consequences for their actions, and the point should be that they're not a great person. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Anyway, this script has been rotting in my Google Drive for too long, and it was more of a door opener for the conversation around this topic than it was analysis. So, tell me what you think. If you saw the Cherry Magic remake, what did you think? If you haven't seen either of these shows and I'm inspiring you to do so, that's awesome. Even if you've only seen I Promised You the Moon, like, that's fine. Again, I didn't watch the GMM remake. I could be wrong. So come yell at me about it. Make sure you also give my last few videos a watch and let me know what you think about those as well. And if you've already seen them, maybe rewatch this too. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and pretty much anywhere if you look hard enough. So yeah, bye!